men usually take the question of who they are to the woman, and that God is the person that will give you your name. He's chewing a hole in his lip and he's drinking whiskey and he's taking white crosses to assuage his damn nervous system, which is set on fire. And just think of that. And the politicians that sent him there are still politicking. If you had a good father, you have an obligation to the fatherless. Fathers staying married to the woman that they love, and I failed in that desperately, but they're going to do that. And there's going to be a revival of true men that have been fathered by God. They're not looking to government. They're looking to God and their family. Alone with the Father, you will find the true source that will steady your gaze and mark out your course. Then you will know true strength in your soul, and you as a man will finally be whole. To the woman you choose, a true man you will be, as you offer your strength from a heart that is free. Hey, welcome to podcast number 5. Whew. Deep breath, on our way hopefully to 40. Tonight, the topic is the strength of man. It's a poem that was written, it's obviously in my book. Let me get situated here. It was written many years ago. And it's a lesson that I've had to learn again and again and again. It's one of the more difficult lessons that I've had to learn. I've got some notes here. I know that I can go off on tangents in different directions, and I'm trying to keep this within 30 minutes. And I get nervous. I don't know why. I hope it gets better as I move forward, but I'm doing this by myself largely. I have a person that's very competent at editing and helping me with the algorithms. But I'm home. I'm by myself. But as soon as I hit this button to record this, I just get this rush of adrenaline, and I have to calm down. I've mentioned in other podcasts, and I will get more into this in other podcasts that cover other poems, but I was diagnosed with PTSD. But I want to make something very clear about that. It's not an excuse for a lot of things that I've done in my life. I've done terrible things, lapses in judgment, lapses in morality. And I've told someone, if I would have had a perfect nervous system, if there would have been no damage and I would have been as calm as they used to say, Joe Montana had ice in his veins, just this calm, collected person, I would have used that calmness to sin. And there were times in my life that I was relatively calm. I was clicking along at a relatively good pace. And those were some of the times when I ran headlong into just, I don't know the words, dissipation, sin, having fun, hanging out with my buddies, chasing women, wine women in song, everything that the world puts in your face. My Papa Hancock, who was kind of my surrogate dad, he told me once, he said, Craig, that was his name for me. I'm Greg, but he never called me that. He said, Craig, we go to the gym, we make money, but the main reason is to get women and to have sex. And I said, wow, I was about 15 or 16, but you think of it. Isn't that kind of what the world tells you? You make more money. I see men, very wealthy men, and usually if they have enough money, their selection of women gets younger and younger. And I don't think those women are after those men for anything innately attractive other than their bank accounts. And that's kind of the way of the world. Earth, Wind, and Fire. They had a song about the way of the world. But I digress. So I want to open this up, The Strength of Man. And basically the poem, let me kind of give you a little preface into it because I'm going to cover some things before I actually read the poem. The poem was basically written from my trying to take this question, this who am I, to get my strength to a woman, and how it always is destined to fail. And it's the Proverbs 31. the Proverbs 31 woman. I know you, if you're a Christian, I know you've heard that. But I just want to just read you this little verse. The sayings of King Lemuel contain this message which his mother taught him. So this is a young man being taught by his mother. And she says, O my son, O son of my womb, O son of my vows, do not waste your strength on women, on those who ruin kings. And I just think that is so, it's just succinct and it's so true, but how little it's really adhered to. And I'm an example. And this poem, it comes out of my failures. It comes out of me going to that woman. And all of this is just not something, obviously I have the life experience, but I read a book years ago. I'm 61. Whew. That's tough. Years ago, when I was about 36 or 37, I read a book called Wild at Heart by a guy named John Eldredge. And it was the first time, there was two concepts in that book that I took away. That men usually take the question of who they are to the woman, and that God is the person that will give you your name. I think I talked about the first podcast, Fathers and Sons, and I talked about how I asked God to father me. But those two concepts were put forth to me, along with some other ones, but those really hit home to me because I had just lived that way. I had a cousin in Mississippi when I was a little boy. She was my mother's first cousin. And she told me one time, she said, Greg, you're going to have your heart broken so many times. I was about 13. She said, because you fall in love so damn easily. And I would just flutter and, oh, I'm in love and the crushes. And I think that a lot of that came from the lack of a father. My dad, as I've told you, was drafted at the height of the Vietnam War as an infantryman. And when he came home, he was a mess. And he was removed from my life. My mom divorced him, but I don't think she had a choice. But he was a mess. He came home from the jungles of Vietnam. Hey, thanks for your service. Go be a dad. Go be with your son. Go be with your mother. I know you just had two buddies blown up. I'll talk about them in another one, but I found two of his friends that were killed within a month. One right beside him. Imboden and Moser. And I'll talk about that. But he went through all of that, and he comes home, and the politicians that sent him there, here you go, thank you, go home, be a dad, father your son. And he's chewing a hole in his lip, and he's drinking whiskey, and he's taking white crosses to assuage his damn nervous system, which is set on fire. And just think of that. And the politicians that sent him there are still politicking. They're still glad-handing. They're still going to the Washington press conferences, and they're still patting their pockets and sucking up and posturing. And that's the travesty. But it was that lack of the father. And my mother wasn't this little meek. She was a red-headed hurricane. So I gravitated towards women, and I wanted them to, I guess, validate me. And in the book it says, once you give that woman the power to validate you, at the same time, you give her the power to invalidate you. Bob Seger, he had a song years ago, and it was, I think, Traveling Man. And I just put down some of the words because I want to talk about the allurement of a woman. It's not something that's easy. Oh, just don't run to the woman. I know you don't have a father. You're largely of an orphaned heart. You're trying to find out who you are, so don't run to the woman. What? Why not? I mean, Bob Seger said, women have come, women have gone, everyone trying to cage me. Yeah, oh, some were so sweet, I barely got free. Others, they only enraged me. And I have a very good friend named Glenn Matthews. We were both in the military. We were both in the Army. He was in the Air Force. I was in the Army and the Coast Guard. He was the trifecta. Glenn was in the Army, the Air Force, and the Coast Guard. And Glenn used to tell me, we talked about women because we both love women to a fault. And Glenn would say, Mr. Roller, they're like a drug. It's a drug, Mr. Roller. And it is. It is. It's intoxicating. Scent of a woman. I'm going to get to that in a minute. But that whole concept, scent of a woman, it is intoxicating. But if you go there with the wrong disposition, you're going to get your ass handed to you. And I've had mine handed to me far too many times. And I'm very hard-headed and I'm very slow to learn. But I think I am getting there. About 3 years ago, I went through, I think, my last finishing school in that area, which was followed up by a very short-lived situation, but it taught me. And I think God had to take the 2x4 and hit me right across the bridge of the nose. Say, Greg, what you're looking for isn't there. And you're never going to be ready for the woman until you know who you are in me. And that's what the poem will speak to tonight. But I put, why do men run to women? And I think it's the absence of the father. G.K. Chesterton, this is a quote, purportedly. I've noticed now, if you check quotes, you got 10,000 different opinions. He said it, he didn't say it. I don't know. It was attributed to G.K. Chesterton, and he was an English writer. Every man who knocks on the door of a brothel is looking for God. That's pretty insightful, and I think it's true. I wanted to talk about a strong father, and I saw an example of it. I retired at 41. I'm trying to control my gestures here. I guess I could watch a TED Talk on how to really get influence. You know how you have these videos and, oh, if you really want to make an impact, talk like this and put an inflection here and do this and do the power hands or whatever you see Trump doing. And when I was at East Central, I got sidetracked. When I was at East Central University in southeastern Oklahoma, I went to a Bible study. And I was older. I was like 40, 41 years old. But there was this younger man. He was a football player. And he was a big mountain of a dude. Had a full beard. And probably 6'3". I think he played on the line. But he brought up his father in this Bible study. And we were talking about fathers. And he said, my dad and I, we take the boat out. I think they were relatively affluent on Lake Dallas. I think he was from Texas. And this was a college in southeastern Oklahoma. But he said, we take our boat out. It's like a father-son thing. And he talked about that, but then he said this. He said, my father, even when I'm in the wrong, he won't condone the wrong, but he will always have my back. And man, I had almost a jealousy of that because I never felt like I had that in my corner. And I actually followed him out of that Bible study that night, and I asked him, what I just wanted to know a little bit more about him. And he drove a BMW, by the way. But he wasn't arrogant. I can't explain it. He had this, he was courageous without being a jerk. He was strong without being an arrogant, condescending, and I'm sorry. I mean, when I see, I know this is controversial in this time and frame, but let's say as Shedeur Sanders obviously had that silver spoon, that father that everybody knows. And what does he do? He puts the watch in your face and he lets you know. To me, that is so foreign to Jesus Christ in humility, who rode in on a donkey. And he says, true religion is to visit the widow and the orphan, not to wear silver dookie chains and throw up your, gang signs and talk about how you came up. That's not true religion. And I don't care if the father is black. I don't care if he's white. If you're raising your sons to act that way, you're doing a disservice to them and everyone that has to be around them. And I know that's not going to be popular, but it disgusts me because I didn't come from a father that could run a 2.240 and jump over the moon like Deion Sanders, and had Jason Whitlock, I think, said that Shedeur was raised in a 40,000 square foot house. That don't even make sense. I was raised in a Chickasaw Indian house that my dad had built for us through the Chickasaw Nation because my dad was Chickasaw. And then because of his alcoholism, which I think is tied to Vietnam, we almost lost it. And I damn sure wasn't running around with a watch. Maybe I had a Mickey Mouse watch or a Timex. Yo, check it out. I got the timey on. It's my timey. What? But Shedeur, like I said, it's not a color thing. It's a pride thing. It's an arrogant thing. And I don't think it's ever a good thing to show your ass. God said, I give grace to the humble and I oppose the proud. That's a rabbit hole. But what I wanted to say was that young man, I so wish I would have had that father, because I think it instills that confidence in you. But he not only instills confidence, but he instills in you that you have an obligation, and I'm going to get to that. The movie Scent of a Woman, I wrote this down. And if you've seen the scene, and if you haven't, go watch it. But this young man, Charlie, he doesn't have a father, Colonel Slade, who's got his own issues, but he comes back and he's the advocate for Charlie. And he's in this rich school with all these rich kids, the Hunter Bidens, and their daddies are Joe Biden, or the Donald Trumps, and their daddy's the president. These are these rich schools. That's where they're at. And here's Charlie. And Colonel Slade comes back. And this guy who's trying to use Charlie as a scapegoat because he knows he doesn't have the stroke. You know, he doesn't have that backing. And so he can pick on him. He's the orphan child. He knows that the other ones, they got the daddies, that they're the congressmen, and they're the lawyers, and they're the doctors, and they're in the country clubs. They got a great golf swing, and they're good looking, and their wives are pretty. Not going to go after those boys. And here's what Colonel Slade says. The proctor, or whatever he was at the school, he says, "Mr. Sims, I will give you one final opportunity to speak up." Colonel Slade said, "Mr. Sims doesn't want it. He doesn't need to be labeled still worthy of being a Baird man." What the hell is that? What is your motto here? Boys, inform on your classmates, save your hide. Anything short of that, and we're going to burn you at the stake. Well, gentlemen, when the shit hits the fan, some guys run and some guys stay. Here's Charlie facing the fire, and there's George hiding in Big Daddy's pocket. And what are you doing? You're going to reward George, and you're going to destroy Charlie. If you know that scene, he goes along and he says, "I've been around, you know, and I've seen boys younger than these." We used to do that on the Coast Guard River Tender. But I love that scene. And I always see Hunter sitting next to Joe in that scene, you know, or, all petulantly with his hair over one eye, and he's hiding in Big Daddy's pocket, and or maybe one of the Trump boys in Donald's pocket. And then there's Charlie, maybe the son of a Vietnam veteran who is mentally and physically destroyed because of the same kind of politicians that sent them there. And that brings me to this. We have an obligation to the fatherless. If you had a good father, you have an obligation to the fatherless. I always think about when Cain murdered his brother, and God says, "Where's your brother?" And he says, "Am I my brother's keeper?" What a smarmy, condescending thing to say to God. And I think men that make it big, and they've got money, and they've got the prestige, and they got the fourth woman that's fine as hell, and you want to say, but what about the children? What about the young boys that didn't? Do I have an obligation to them? Obviously not. God has a different view. Jack London said, "The proper function of man is to live, not to exist. I shall not waste my days in trying to prolong them. I shall use my time." I think that speaks to the fact that our purpose is not just to gain pleasure and ease. If you live for pleasure, you're going to die one day. You're not going to take it with you. I love this from the Psalms. It says, "God is a father to the fatherless and a defender of widows. This is God whose dwelling is holy. God places the lonely in families. He sets the prisoners free and gives them joy. But he makes the rebellious live in a sun-scorched land." Psalms 56, 5, and 6. I love a Charles Dickens's Christmas Carol, especially the one with George C. Scott. There's a scene where it's the ghost of Christmas Present, and he takes him and he opens his robe, and there's this little girl and this little boy, and they have the dark circles under their eyes, and they look horrific. They look like some kind of ghostly ghouls. And he says, "This boy is ignorance, this girl is want. Beware them both, and all of their degree, but most of all beware this boy. For on his brow I see that written which is doom, unless the writing be erased." And I looked this up, and as a synopsis from the movie, it says, instead of creating a community in which life can be enjoyed by all, Dickens highlights the injustice of wealth distribution, ignorance, and want. Dickens uses two wretched children called ignorance and want. And I think that greed is much easier to cloak than laziness. I mean, lazy, you see, he's a lazy ass. You see it. And it's disparaged, and rightfully so. Paul said, if you don't work, you don't eat. But the point is, greed can be praised as thrift and frugality, when all you are is a selfish... You feel like you have no obligation but to yourself and to your kind. And you have the profligate son who's been in 10 rehabs, and, but you're still, they still always come out on their feet. And the young boy that doesn't have a father, when he runs into trouble with the law, maybe on a far lesser charge, maybe it's a marijuana charge, a big DA who could give a damn about the prospects of this young man's future life, throws the book at him because he doesn't have Big Daddy to hide in. And this DA's trying to make a name for themselves. I've been around. I went to law school. I did three semesters at two different law schools. That's a story, or four. I think I did 4 semesters. But the point is, I am like Colonel Slade. I've been around, and I've worked in legal offices. I worked for the JAG Corps in Germany. I've been around lawyers. Some of them aren't particularly bright. I'm sorry, it's just a fact. And they prostitute the human language. And if they have a young man without a father, they're going to slam his ass to make, hey, I'm a DA. I've got 15 convictions. Why didn't you prosecute, that congressman's son? Well, it's always been that way. And I'm getting to the end of this. I'm trying. I hate to feel like I'm rushing, and I know I'm almost at 30 minutes. But another concept is that the elites who perpetuate this, who don't feel that they have any obligation other than to their own, and just padding their pockets more and more and more, they never tell you what they feel until they feel completely safe. When they feel safe, when they have all their bases covered, and they can slide in at home without the possibility of getting tagged, they're going to say stuff like this. To just be grossly generalistic, you could put half of Trump's supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables, right? There's laughter and applause. The racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, you name it. And unfortunately, there are people like that. And he has lifted them up. He has given voice to their websites that used to only have 11,000, now 11 million. He tweets and retweets offensive, hateful, mean-spirited rhetoric. Now, some of those folks, they are irredeemable. Such a grace-filled talk, isn't it? But thankfully, they are not America. I won't even say who said that. Joe Biden, at the height of the pandemic, I'll never forget him standing up there like we were little children and saying, our patience is running out with you. We've been patient. We've been gracious. But this experimental vaccine by this man named Tony Fauci, who I wouldn't drink some milk that he poured in a damn glass. But hey, our patience is running out. That's what Joe Biden thought of you. He thought you were these redheaded stepchildren that he could pop on the nose and say, take your shot. He felt safe. Why not? Hell, he'd been in politics for 50 years. Nothing ever happened to him, as he patted his family's pocket. I mean, come on. I'm just telling you, when they feel safe, they're going to let you know so quick what they think. What is true religion? Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. That's God's definition of true religion. The orphan and the widow. If you have a good father, be grateful. If you're a father, be a father to a young man that doesn't have a father. But first, get your fathering from God, which is what my poem speaks to. Don't get it from Wall Street or some jackass out in the country club with his $15,000 clubs and his, get it from the Father. And I promise if you go straight to the Father and you get alone with him and he speaks to your heart, you're not going to be putting your watch in people's faces. You're going to be humble, and you're going to be so grateful for what you've been saved from first. And you're going to have a heart for the fatherless. You're going to have a heart for the orphan. You're going to know, especially if you were one. I know what it feels like. I've seen my father passed out on the couch, pissed all over himself in a stupor, and the shame that it put on me. I've seen my father in a rage break my spirit and throw me against the wall with his hand in my face and tell me, I'm going to fuck you up. And I was petrified. And he wasn't bluffing. He had lost control of his stuff. And I know a lot of that. I have aunts that knew him before Vietnam, and they said, that wasn't your dad. When he came back from Vietnam, he was a different person. And do you understand why I have loathing for the Lindsey Grahams and the military-industrial complex? And guys, our country, I'm just going to say this in closing before the point. We're in a terrible shape. I've seen like Ilhan Omar speak horrendous things about this country, and there's crickets because we are a weak country. I think we're under God's judgment. Women rule over us. Men are largely absent. The strongest thing, there's a verse, I forgot to put it, but God says something about he's going to turn the hearts of the sons back to their fathers and the fathers to their sons. If there's any hope for this country, it's not going to be in Donald Trump. I can damn sure guarantee you that. Or J.D. Vance. It's going to be in individual, everyday fathers staying married to the woman that they love. And I failed in that desperately. But they're going to do that. And there's going to be a revival of true men that have been fathered by God. They're not looking to government. They're looking to God and their family. That's it. That is the only chance of this nation being saved. That's it. You can do everything. You can wear your red hat and you can go to the... If the fathers' hearts aren't returned to the sons and the sons to the fathers, and if those fathers haven't been fathered by the ultimate father, you're pissing in the wind. It's that simple. So the poem, I'm almost at 30 minutes. It's called The Strength of Man, and I'm going to read this very quickly, and I'm going to be done tonight. I'm in the middle of a move, probably a little bit amped. I'm moving back to Mississippi, and I'm in flux. So forgive me if this one was a little bit disjointed. But fathers, it's not fathers and sons. It's The Strength of Man on page 30 of my book. And my mother actually brought me this poem years ago. I forgot about writing it. I was still putting some flames out on my back from a bad relationship. I was in my probably late 30s. And she said, I found this poem. I don't even know who wrote it. And I started reading it because it was written in pencil on paper. And I got halfway through it and I said, hey, I wrote this. So this is the poem, and this is the lesson that I've had to learn again and again and again. And if this country is to be saved, it will be fathers being fathered by God in what I speak about in this book, in this poem. The Strength of Man. These words that I write are mellowed like wine, fermented in cellars from deep in my mind. My pain and confusion has opened a route, and from the ink in this pen, my wine does spill out. Not one word wasted, no spurious lines, just truth that's been tested by fire refined. I have learned as a man you must stand alone and search until you've a strength of your own. The woman so full of beauty and charm, if pursued out of weakness, will only do harm. The ache in the soul with its desperate appeal to gain strength from a woman can never fulfill. At first she will comfort and want you around, let you drink from her passion, but strength won't be found. The rush and excitement will soon turn to gray, and your strength as a man will be given away. What you believed was so true, you inhaled like fresh air, but the scent of a woman will turn to despair. Her words become razors when she's seeking to lead, with indifference dismiss you in your hour of need. Your heart that was captured by her fluttering eyes, when viewing your weakness, will grow to despise all that you are and hoped you could be, and pour contempt on what's left of your bruised dignity. In desperation and total dismay, you will cling and appease. You will give her her way. All of it's futile, even if it's unfair, but the strength of a man just isn't there. And the harder you try to extract from her grace will only bring pain and add years to your face. But I write not these lines to sever your rope, to tear down your walls or vanquish your hope. And if you will listen to the words that I say, it will lead to your healing in a much better way. First, bind up your wounds, now steady your feet. Make vows to the Lord to never repeat the choices that's left you weak and despised, yet know from these ashes your true strength will rise. A man's strength is masculine, tempered with love, and given by grace from the Father above. No woman can tell you that you are a man, and your strength can't be grasped in a feminine hand. Alone with the Father, you will find the true source that will steady your gaze and mark out your course. Then you will know true strength in your soul, and you as a man will finally be whole. To the woman you choose, a true man you will be, as you offer your strength from a heart that is free. And if she is willing, discerning and wise, for you alone will she only have eyes. If her heart is right toward God and with man, she will gladly accept the strength from your hand. Then your soul will be strengthened, but not out of lust, but by love for a woman that your heart fully trusts. I hope that this podcast encourages you to do that. I know I was a little amped up tonight. I feel very strongly about this subject. I did come from a place of being largely unfathered, and I did ask God to father me in my mid-30s, and hopefully He's still doing that right up to the present. If you are a man, you have an obligation to father others that don't have the dads. Even if you've got 10 sons and they're wonderful sons and you love them, fine. Teach them to father the boys that don't have fathers, and you father them too. But get fathered by God first. Don't produce other posers. Don't produce what you think you are apart from God, because you're nothing apart from the Father. Thank you for watching, and we'll be on podcast number 6. Thank you.